The explosion was seen by millions, but what happened after remained hidden under the surface of the ocean, silent, somber, and almost forgotten by the public. The Challenger's loss was not merely a tragedy in the air, it left behind haunting questions that few would dare to ask. What really happened to the crew once the smoke had settled? In this narrative, we present 6 formidable and disturbing facts, each moving us one step closer to a reality that remains painful decades on. From clandestine recovery efforts to somber last respects, each detail is imbued with a heft that lingers on. And one fact is unforgettable. The Space Shuttle Challenger crew was an exceptional and diverse group, people who had brought skill, bravery, and a collective passion for exploration to work for NASA's 51L mission. They included seasoned pilots, skilled engineers, and brilliant scientists, each determined to push the limits of human possibility. Mission Commander Francis R. Dick Scobie, an Air Force officer and experienced pilot, commanded the mission. Assisting him was pilot Michael J. Smith, a naval aviator on his inaugural shuttle mission. Both of them were responsible for controlling shuttle operations during re-entry, orbit, and launch, tasks requiring utmost precision and calmness. Mission specialists Judith A. Resnick, Ronald E. McNair, and Ellison S. Onizuka added top-notch knowledge in engineering, physics, and space science, as well as pioneering achievement in representation within NASA. Resnick was the second American woman to go to space, and Onizuka was the first Asian American astronaut in space. McNair, a physicist, had been an advocate for diversity and education within the space program. Payload specialist Gregory B. Jarvis, an aerospace engineer with Hughes Aircraft, had waited years for his turn in space after multiple delayed flights. On Challenger, he intended to run fluid dynamics experiments in microgravity. Arguably the most famous crew member was Krista McAuliffe, a social studies teacher at Concord High School in Concord, New Hampshire. Of 11,000 applications for NASA's Teacher in Space project, McAuliffe was chosen. McAuliffe's objective was to conduct classroom-to-space flight experiments and become an ambassador of education. With warmth, humility, and excitement, she captivated the nation, telling reporters before launch, "I still can't believe that I'm gonna actually be going into that shuttle." Her presence inspired countless students and educators, giving the mission a personal and relatable human dimension. On launch morning, the crew's faces radiated joy and gratitude as they waved to the crowds, offering brief but heartfelt thanks to those who had made their journey possible. Their optimism and willingness to face the unknown made the tragedy that followed even more devastating. In losing them, the world lost not only the scientific possibilities they carried but also the very spirit of human curiosity and perseverance. This flight, more than any, represented the shuttle program's move toward routine spaceflight, but it had added significance with McAuliffe carrying the dreams of classrooms across the country into the heavens. Following the tragedy, recovery forces found the undamaged crew cabin on the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean on March 9, 1986. It wasn't fully recovered until April 20. Personal items and research equipment were inside, silent, haunting reminders of lives and work cut short. The bodies of the crew were in such a sorry shape that NASA and military authorities prevented the public from knowing the details. A subsequent report cited the New York Times in its description of them as so badly damaged that they could not be identified even as human. Identification was done at Patrick Air Force Base Hospital with the help of the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology. The Challenger crew is now at rest in Arlington National Cemetery, their bodies cremated and interred in a common grave under a memorial. Individual graves were also established for Scobie and Smith. These plots serve as enduring reminders of their sacrifice and of the dangers of discovery. The diversity of the crew, race, gender, occupation, background, was a vision of an open America, with each astronaut having transcended personal and institutional obstacles to become an astronaut. Their flight was not only scientific, it was an affirmation of endurance and of the cross-cultural desire to dream. You have heard of the heroes. Now, get ready for the moment that would test their legacy. The 1980s were a decade characterized by unlimited enthusiasm for space exploration, and at NASA, that enthusiasm seemed unstoppable. Barely more than a decade had elapsed since the success of Apollo 11's moon landing in 1969, and the U.S. space program had redirected its goals from lunar discovery to a daring new dream, reusable spacecraft that could make space exploration more affordable, more routine, and more productive. In 1973, the European Space Research Organization allied with NASA to create an orbital space laboratory, a breakthrough that set the stage for international collaboration in space. That was followed through into 1981 with the Columbia's inaugural shuttle flight successfully carrying out an orbital mission and safely returning to Earth. This milestone marked the beginning of the Space Shuttle era, with frequent flights and scientific discoveries resulting in a growing conviction that interplanetary travel, and even, perhaps, a manned mission to Mars, was within their reach. The Norman Augustine vision was to normalize spaceflight or transform it into an ordinary activity, from a rare feat into something routine. The general public accepted the notion that not just astronauts, but scientists, engineers, and even common citizens could travel beyond our planet. This reality came true with the Teacher in Space project, which chose Christa McAuliffe out of more than 11,000 applicants as the first civilian to go on a mission. Her task was to encourage students all over the country to believe that space was not just the domain of astronauts in their flight suits anymore. As launch day for the Challenger neared, excitement grew. Schools nationwide were preparing to show the event live on television, allowing millions of students the unique chance to view history in the making firsthand. To many, it was their initial link to space travel, made all the more intimate through watching someone with all the same characteristics as their own educators in space. But on January 28, 1986, the hope was destroyed. Only 73 seconds into its flight, Challenger burst into a cloud of smoke and fire and broke apart high over the Atlantic Ocean. Millions were stunned, among them many schoolchildren who had just seconds before been cheering. The impact was immediate and intense. President Ronald Reagan delivered an address to the nation later that day, stating, "Today is a day for mourning and remembering. Nancy and I are deeply hurt by the Shuttle Challenger tragedy." Investigators later concluded that the disaster was caused by a malfunctioning O-ring seal on the right solid rocket booster. The defect, long recognized by engineers, had been exacerbated by low temperatures on launch day. Pressure to maintain the deadline had trumped warnings, and the result was horrific. The Challenger flight had not been ceremonial at all, it bore crucial payloads, such as a tracking and data relay satellite to enhance the communications abilities of NASA, and an instrument intended to study Halley's Comet in its once-in-a-lifetime passage through the solar system. It was to be yet another step in making space a functional domain for science, education, and global cooperation. Instead, it served as a wake-up call that compelled NASA, and the world, to confront the risky nature of human spaceflight. Following the disaster, shuttle missions were grounded for almost 3 years as NASA revamped its safety procedures, launch operations, and engineering management. The Challenger catastrophe closed the period of unflappable public trust in the shuttle program. Safety and conservatism now overshadowed speed and showmanship. For educators, Christa McAuliffe's loss was especially heartbreaking. But in her absence, her purpose created change. Schools added more STEM curriculum, memorial programs were set up, and the Challenger Center for Space Science Education was created to continue her work. In classrooms across America, she turned tragedy into education, seeing that her vision of inspiring the next generation didn't perish with her. On the morning of January 28, 1986, Challenger lifted off from Cape Canaveral in what was expected to be a significant but straightforward mission. Within 73 seconds, it became one of the most infamous tragedies in American space history. The shuttle disintegrated in midair, splitting into trails of smoke and fire against the blue sky. Most adults watched the event later on recorded broadcasts, but hundreds of thousands of children watched it in real time, seeing their idol Christa McAuliffe take off, only to witness it end in tragedy. The scientific goals of the mission were significant. The launching of a tracking and data relay satellite to enhance communications for NASA and an instrument to observe Halley's Comet. But its emotional pull was based on McAuliffe's involvement. As the first civilian educator in space, she represented a new generation where common citizens were able to contribute to extraordinary endeavors. Her excitement in interviews, her incredulity at being offered the opportunity, and her dedication to involving students in sharing the experience lent the launch an unprecedented sense of intimacy with ordinary Americans. The origin of the tragedy was identified as a faulty O-ring on one of the right solid rocket boosters. The launch day's extreme cold made the O-ring unable to seal, causing the hot gases to burn through and ignite the fuel in the external tank. Engineers had already expressed doubts about the O-ring's ability to perform in low temperatures, but NASA executives under pressure to adhere to the launch plan chose to push forward. The aftermath was a turning point for NASA. The agency grounded shuttle flights for almost 3 years, literally reorganizing its safety, engineering oversight, and decision-making approach. The Challenger astronauts, Commander Francis R. Dick Scobie, pilot Michael J. Smith, mission specialists Judith A. Resnick, Ronald E. McNair, and Ellison S. Onizuka, payload specialist Gregory B. Jarvis, and Krista McAuliffe, died.